So let's just jump right in. Right now, Washington, D.C. is basically a pressure cooker. Seriously, it feels like every single major pillar of American power is being tested, all at the exact same time. This isn't just one crisis, it's shaping up to be a full-blown week of reckoning.
And you can literally hear the clock ticking. We are just 4 days away from the US government completely running out of money and shutting down. You can feel the tension building all over the Capitol.
But look, this whole shutdown drama, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's the most visible part of a much bigger story about these intense power struggles that are just consuming Washington. So let's unpack how all these different pressures are hitting the system at once.
First up, that shutdown clock. This is the crisis that's right in our faces, a high-stakes political showdown over the federal budget that has pretty much brought Congress to a grinding halt.
And at the heart of it, you've got two sides that are worlds apart. You have the Democrats, with Hakeem Jeffries saying that extremists are basically holding the government hostage. But then you talk to Republicans, like Congressman French Hill, and they say, hang on, we already passed a clean bill to keep things running. It's the Democrats who are blocking it and creating this crisis. It is a classic DC staring contest.
The stakes here are just huge. I mean, even Republicans like Congressman Hill, who are in the middle of this fight, are admitting that the consequences are, and I'm quoting him, all bad. A shutdown doesn't actually save money. It often costs even more in the long run. Plus, it means crucial economic numbers, like the jobs report, might not come out. It just weakens the entire economy.
But here's the kicker this time. The threat feels different. The administration is now talking about mass layoffs instead of the usual furloughs. Now, you got to understand the difference. A furlough is temporary. You go home, you don't get paid, but you come back. A layoff, that's permanent. It's a whole new level of escalation, basically signaling that, hey, maybe some of those government jobs weren't really needed anyway.
Okay, so while all of Congress is locked in this stalemate, another massive fight is blowing up. And this one's between the White House and the justice system, and it gets personal. From President Trump's perspective, this is not complicated. He's saying the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey has nothing to do with the law, and everything to do with going after his political enemies, who he calls corrupt. For him, this is about cleaning house. And Comey's response? It was swift. He dropped a video, firing right back. He's framing himself as the one standing up to a bully, saying he has faith the courts will prove he's innocent. So what you have is this head-on collision, not just between two powerful figures, but between two totally different ideas about what the Justice Department is for. So is there a real case here? Well, if you listen to someone like Nick Ackerman, a former Watergate prosecutor, he says this thing is built on sand. For starters, the main witness has apparently changed their story. The special prosecutor leading the case, no prior grand jury experience. And maybe the biggest red flag? Career prosecutors already looked at this and decided there was, quote, no there there. All right, let's shift gears from the political battles to the intersection of tech, national security, and big money. There's a massive deal brewing around TikTok. The valuation for TikTok's US operations has been set at just $14 billion. Now that might sound like a lot of money, and, it is. But for context, analysts were throwing around numbers as high as $40 billion. So, why the steep discount? Well, you gotta look at the fine print of the deal. The Chinese owner, ByteDance, would drop its direct stake to below 20%, which follows the letter of the law. But here's the catch. They would still get about half the profit because they'd be licensing their super valuable algorithm back to the new American company. So it raises a huge question. Does this deal really cut ties with China, or does it just kind of rearrange the furniture? And you have to remember, none of this domestic drama is happening in a bubble. It's being reflected in America's complicated, sometimes contradictory role in the world, which was on full display at the UN this week. On the world stage, you're seeing two very different versions of American foreign policy play out. When it comes to the war in Ukraine, the US and its Western allies are pretty much marching in lockstep. But then you look at the war in Gaza, and the US is standing with an increasingly isolated Israel, while a lot of the world is critical. It's a really stark contrast. And that feeling of weakness, of institutions under strain, it was perfectly captured by Ukrainian President Zelensky at the UN. He basically said that our global institutions have become too weak to stop major conflicts. And that theme, it sounds an awful lot like what we're seeing back home in the US. So when you pull all these different threads together, a deadlocked Congress, a justice system under fire, a splintered foreign policy, you start to see a much bigger picture of what's happening to the balance of power in America. Here's the bottom line.
This isn't just a bad week in Washington. What we're witnessing is a moment where the core institutions of American life, Congress, the courts, the economy, foreign policy, they're all getting hit with these intense, simultaneous stress tests from all sides.
And that really leaves us with this one huge question. In a moment like this, when all the old rules seem to be breaking and the guardrails are bending, what is it exactly that's supposed to hold the center together?